que corre a cargo de Jörg Sigfusson. Y antes de nada, me gustaría reconocerle públicamente el hecho de que hoy esté aquí, porque de verdad que tuvo que hacer un encaje de bolillos a nivel personal y profesional impresionante. Le agradezco muchísimo el hecho de que problemas técnicos. Nada, os decía que le agradezco un montón el hecho de que esté aquí, porque de verdad está sin dormir, se va y ya prácticamente al finalizar, y tiene que estar, creo que en Santiago de Chile, o sea, lo cual tampoco podrá dormir, y de verdad que quiero agradecerle públicamente el esfuerzo de verdad que realizó para estar aquí. Bueno, Jörg Sigfusson es el director del Centro Irlandés de Investigación y Análisis Social desde el 2002, prácticamente uno de los fundadores. Sus principales responsabilidades como director del Centro de Investigación y Análisis son supervisar los programas de juventud en Islandia, Juventud en Europa y en este momento Planet Young, y proyectos en prevención basados en la evidencia científica y sobre todo en programas de intervención comunitaria en promoción de la salud. Los datos que recoge John, dada a gran escala, y los resultados creados a partir de estos programas, como todos conocemos o muchos conocemos, han servido de guía para que muchos países y ayuntamientos en los 5 continentes hayan podido establecer programas en la lucha contra el uso de sustancias por parte de los jóvenes y mejorar el bienestar de los adolescentes. John ha administrado nada más y nada menos que aproximadamente 1 millón de cuestionarios en todo el mundo. Por lo tanto, manejar 1 millón de cuestionarios con todos los datos que ahora y que ayer nos presentó Patricia, pues realmente creo que tiene un conocimiento muy amplio de la juventud. Y ya para finalizar, bueno, además de dar conferencias por todo el mundo, como podéis comprobar, ¿no?, que es un gran orador. Y os voy a contar una anécdota ya para finalizar. Yo cuando conocí el modelo islandés, cuando veía los resultados de John, no me los creía. Yo no me creía que fuese posible que un país bajase de un 30 y tantos % el consumo a un 5 o 6%. Y yo dije, esta gente miente, ¿no? Tienen que mentir, tienen que alterar las estadísticas, porque yo como profesional que me dedico al tema de prevención veía inviable llegar a esa reducción, ¿no? Y no solo era cierto, sino que hoy en día soy uno de los máximos defensores de este modelo. A Patricia ya la conozco hace mucho tiempo, y realmente creo que es un lujo y un placer tener a John aquí, y sobre todo que nos haga ver que hay otra forma de trabajar, ¿no? Por lo menos que hay una forma mucho más eficiente de trabajar y de conseguir que la sociedad pues consuma en menor medida drogas. Nada, os dejo ya con él, que estamos todos esperando escuchar.
Thank you for the introduction, Manuel, and for the invitation. Even though I have only been here in your beautiful city for a few hours, I see a lot of similarities with my country. First of all, of course, the Vikings, which is really a very warm welcome for me. And another similarity that I see is that the weather, the climate, the temperature is the same here in the winter as in Iceland in the summer. So many similarities. Now, again, prevention is possible is the title of this presentation. And it is possible to prevent children from using drugs. We know that now. We have built this knowledge on evidence for more than 20 years, and I'm going to just run through it with you. This picture is taken downtown Reykjavik in the summer of June in 1997, and the town was full of drunken young people. It's daylight, of course. We have bright light all day in this time of the year. And at this time, about 20 years ago, Icelandic adolescents, they scored highest in the use of substances, cannabis, alcohol, and tobacco in Europe. Now they score among the lowest. So this is alcohol. We went from 42% in the age group of 15 and 16-year-olds who got drunk for the last 30 days in '98, down to 5% already in 2013, and we are trying, of course, to maintain that or even get totally rid of it. Now, about 3 years ago, this item was presented in newspapers all over the world. Iceland knows how to stop teen substance use, but the world isn't listening. Since then, the phone has not stopped ringing, and we have been now working in all the continents, and Planet Youth has been introduced or implemented in all the continents, except Antarctica. This is what happened in a matter of few days in January 2017. But actually, it is no magic what we have been doing. It's just logical common sense. This is the development. If we look at 15 and 16-year-old students in secondary school, this is '98. This is now, they've gone from 42% in getting drunk for the past month, down to 7% last year. Daily smoking was 23%, and that has almost disappeared. And cannabis lifetime use was 17%, and that is now down to 6-7%. But it's not all a bed of roses, because there is one thing that is not in this picture and is very new to us. And we almost have an epidemic of the use of electronic cigarettes or vaping. Almost 10% of these kids today are vaping daily, and 23% of our high school students are vaping daily. So there are always new challenges. Now, our friends, they often try to explain to us why this can be done in Iceland particularly. These are the Scandinavian flags, and these are the heavy episodic drinking figures from the last SPAT study that was presented in 2015. Iceland was then here at the bottom, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. More than half of the 15 and 16-year-olds in the same age group had become drunk for the past month. So it's not because we are Scandinavian at all. Others have said, you can change these things because you are an island in the middle of an ocean. So it's easy for you. Then we often point at another beautiful island, not so far away from here, where the situation is really bad. Smoking, drinking, and cannabis. I was in Malta recently. I love the island. Talking to people there and asking why is this so high. And the main explanation I got was it's because of the tourists. In Iceland, we have 360,000 people and 2.5 million tourists. So it's not the tourists to blame. People always try to find reasons not to, accept the responsibility. That's a very human element. Now, the international development of the model in 2005, Iceland had gone down by 50% in all categories in the use of alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis. And then some European municipalities started implementing this, asking us for assistance. And we have found out that the methodology is so logical that it is easily transferable. And I will come to that in a minute. This is what happened. Started with 8 cities in Europe, and now, as I told you, we just started this work in Australia, Colombia, Chile, Canada just signed the first contract last month, and also in Vermont in the United States. Now, how did we reach this? What did we do? There are 3 main building blocks. These are the key elements. The first one is evidence. We always have to build our work on evidence. We cannot just do something because we feel like it, or somebody says something, or everybody's talking about something. We have evidence. We work on a local basis. We would never, like Patricia knows very well, we would never look at Spain as one entity. We need to work in the different areas. There are now several municipalities in Spain. Tarragona, 5? Yeah. I'm not going to pronounce the names, but there are 5 beautiful places, and where things are being worked on the local level. And the third main thing is we need to create a dialogue between researchers, policymakers, and practitioners. It is impossible to achieve anything if you are, for example, in a municipality where the divisions don't know what each other is doing, in a ministry where people don't work together. We have to take people from all the areas, researchers, policymakers, and practitioners, and they each have to work together. And what I'm going to show you in a minute is a way to get these people to work together. Now, this is not so complicated. Evidence, community, and dialogue. We are often asked, why research-based? Why are you so occupied by talking about research? It's just prevention, people say to us. Just prevention. Why don't you just do prevention work? The reason is simple. Everywhere you want to succeed, you need research. Engineering, fisheries, pharmaceutical. You wouldn't put a new pill on the market in the pharmacy to people. No. You wouldn't do that. You need research. You wouldn't build a bridge without testing the foundations. Do research there first. So everywhere, research is a base. So why should we stop using research when it comes to the most important thing in our lives, our children? Why should we then start using our feelings? It makes no sense. We have to have research, local research. We were blessed with the fact that we started really early in Iceland, and when I say we, it's all the people working on prevention in Iceland. What me and am doing, what I'm doing, and the institution is simply providing data to the people who really need it. So we have been monitoring children from the age of 10 to 18 for more than 25 years now. And the question is, they don't only ask about how much the children drink or smoke. They ask about everything in the environment, everything of importance in the lives of children. They ask about physical and mental health, friends, parents, family, school, of course, drinking and smoking, but we need to know all these things so that we can actually use this data. And every time that we collect data, which is every year, we divide the work up into 2 parts, practical and scientific. The scientific part, we have published, I've lost count, somewhere between 120 and 150, 60 peer-reviewed papers in international journals. So science always forms the platform for practice. And this is what many scientists do only. They publish papers. And that's normal because in the academia you're not trained to actually be working in the field with people, like in prevention. So that's the scientific role. And the practical role is that if you collect data today, within just a few weeks, all the municipalities in our country and all the schools that are big enough, they have their own findings. They know exactly what the situation is in each and every municipality. They also see the link between consumption of, for example, alcohol and the so-called risk and protective factors. So if something is wrong in your school now, you can address it. We cannot bring figures 1 or 2 or 3 years after we collect the data. That's old news, that's history. That's just for the Statistical Bureau to use for monitoring. So we use the data, the information that we get from the children, to actually act immediately. If something is wrong amongst girls in 9th grade in this school, we can do it. Immediate feedback, not 3 or 4 years later. Every school, every parent, every prevention worker can have access to the current situation. This is our children right now. Because if you would bring this 2 or 3 years after, then people will say, well, this is somebody else's kids 2 or 3 years ago, not my kids. So measure often, at least biannually, we do it annually, because things change fast in the environment of children. And of course we have sophisticated data systems that process this, and actually all the reports are ready before we get the data. And when we get the data, we pour the data into a funnel, and out come the reports. This is a favorite picture. I have 2 of these. This is one. And if you imagine this boat as your hometown, you have a university with a researchers, and they look ahead and they publish papers, reports. And when they have published a paper, what do? They start the next paper, right? And there is absolutely no direct connection between the researcher, policymaker, blindfolded, or the practitioners. This research is not helping anyone in this work. This is Planet Youth. Researcher, immediate feedback, just within weeks of the data collection, so the policymakers know exactly what to do, what to emphasize, and the practitioners have information on the local level. Common sense, right? We have a friend who was speaking after one of us at the United Nations a year ago, and we were a little bit afraid because he started by saying, Iceland isn't doing anything special. They're not doing anything special. They're just doing what works and what we all know is working. So, research, policy, practice. And there is one thing, there are no quick fixes. We have come to cities where things have been developing in a negative way. There is more and more substance use, more and more use of cannabis, more and more use of alcohol amongst adolescents. And this has been developing for 10, 20, 30 years. And people ask, okay, how long do we need? Can we fix this in 1 year or 2 years? No, you cannot. It's a long-term commitment, and there are no quick fixes. No silver bullets or magic. Simply, we have to change the way people work in prevention. Now, come with me back to 1998. What did we learn in 98? We had data then already since 1992, or even a little bit longer, and we could see a constant rise in the use of substances amongst adolescents, children. They're children until 18. Cannabis was going up, tobacco and alcohol was going through the roof. But at that time, it was possible to see from the data that there were certain things in the environment of children linked with the fact if they started to use drugs or not. And these are the four main domains of intervention that we've been working with: family, peer group, school and well-being, and extracurricular activities, and the individual in the middle. There we could see the so-called risk and protective factors. We could see a lot of correlations. We didn't look for causality because we could not do that from our data. We saw correlations between, this is strong connection between drinking and spending time with parents, smoking and participating in sports. So hundreds of correlations. And what we suggested was, okay, why don't we try to strengthen what we assume is a preventive factor and weaken what we assume is a risk factor. Also using common sense there. And when we were digging deeper, we could see the family factors. We could see how the family could be the biggest preventive factor in the life of children. Family. Children who reported spending a lot of time with parents, they were less likely to start using drugs. Children who reported that it was easy to get caring and warmth at home, same. Children who reported that they thought that their parents knew where the children were at night and with whom, they were less likely to start using drugs. So these things we could teach. Teach who? We started teaching the parents about what they could do to be the biggest preventive factor, what they should do and what they should not do. We could see also as a risk factor that children who reported that their parents gave them alcohol at home to make them kind of getting used to alcohol, they were more likely to start drinking strong alcohol soon after. Because if you give your child alcohol, you're saying, first of all, it's okay, my child, that you drink alcohol, I'm okay with that. And secondly, you are making sure your child drinks what you give your child, and then probably some more. You are accepting it. This we could also teach parents. The peer group, we saw a lot of things there. For example, hanging out late at night downtown or somewhere doing nothing. Kids who reported this, they were more likely to start using drugs. So we did something about that. We taught this to parents. We changed our rules, even the laws, about outside hours, because it's a risk for the children. Now there is, in the Children's Prevention Act, which is 101 articles, Article 93 is children should not stay out late at night because it's dangerous for them. That's when bad things happen. The school well-being, it goes without saying that the better our children feel, the less likely they are to start using drugs. So all sorts of initiatives, programs were started in schools to make the well-being better, also outside of school. And the third part, what we saw there was that children who reported participating in extracurricular activities 3 or 4 times a week, organized extracurricular activities, in our circumstances, they were less likely to start using drugs, alcohol, for example. Later, when we started working in other countries, in 2006, 7, 8, we saw this was sometimes on the opposite. Children, boys who practiced football 3 or 4 or 5 times a week with an organized club, they were more likely to start using alcohol. So when we dug into that, we could see the reason. It was accepted by the parents, by the club, that the children actually had beer after a game. We could also sometimes see that the role models, the quality of the trainers was not good enough. So one important element here now is quality. So children who are in activities 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, in organized conditions and quality controlled, they are less likely to start using drugs. But this is a tough thing somewhere to change, because we see we're working in many places in Europe, and even where the law says that children are not allowed to go and drink in a bar until 18, they go there at the age of 14, 15, and 16, and it's accepted. So there is a challenge. If I would stop this presentation right now, what we have been doing, the people who have been working in prevention in Iceland, they have been strengthening the preventive factors and trying to eliminate or reduce the risk factors. And we've been doing this by teaching the environment, not the children. Children are clever. They know that drugs are dangerous. We don't have to tell them that. Making a school program is very easy, and you can check a box. Yes, we have a school program against drugs. But that's simply not working. We have to change the environment of children. So in '98, our government and the municipalities decided to initiate this program called Drug-Free Iceland, and many people laughed, said this is crazy, this is impossible. And this was about to trying out a totally new methodology based on evidence, based on science. Because what we had been doing before was not working. We had mainly been teaching the children. We had been doing this, you know. We have school program after school program after school program, telling children not to use drugs. And how many children do you know who have chosen their parents? Not many. How many children do you know who decide where they grow up, in which environment, which areas? They don't. So we cannot say to a child, hey my boy, don't drink. I know all your 20 friends drink, but don't drink. It's not working. So we took this and threw it away. Just say no doesn't work. We were trying to scare kids. Just tell them, this, when you're 55 years old, is how your lungs will look like. I mean, they're 15-year-old. They don't care. You know, they don't think so. The nearest future is next Friday. So the aim of Drug-Free Iceland was to change the behavior and to change the lifestyle environment of children. We sent a clear message to everybody about the risk and protective factors. There were campaigns, all sorts of programs initiated, campaigns for parents, like one was called 18-year guarantee. It means that when you buy a new car, you have a 3 to 7 year guarantee, depending on the brand. But when you have a child, it's 18 years. We have campaigns saying, I say no because I love you, you know, and empowering parents. A lot of things were done all over the society. When we dug deeper into the data, and we have of course been doing this continuously for the past 20 years, we could see an interesting thing. Children born in '85, when they were 13-year-old, 20% of those had become drunk. 2 years later, 57%. 6 years later, in '91, we did the same, or with the same cohort. Then children the age of 13, 10% had become drunk, not 20. And 2 years later, 41%, not 57. This was telling us that this work must start at a very, very young age. Possibly, you know, even when the child is born. We have to start teaching the parents and creating an environment immediately after the child is born. I showed you this picture just before. Denmark, alcohol, getting drunk, and Iceland. This here circle is the age of initiation in Iceland when you start having alcohol. This is Denmark, 2 years earlier. So we must postpone or delay the initiation of using alcohol as long as possible. And let me show you this. Substance use follows cohorts, birth cohorts. So this is all high school students in Iceland from the age of 16 and upwards, 16 to 18, 19 mostly. In the year 2000, 64% had become drunk for the past 30 days. This is high school students. Now, 38%. So high school students today, they drink less than secondary school students 20 years ago. And this is showing us also from high school students who have never become drunk in their lives. In the year 2000, this was 18% who had never become drunk in their life. Now it's 46% and rising. Almost half of all high school students have never become drunk. So it's not considered an obligation or something that you need to do when you go to high school. Totally different lifestyles. Now from the National Institute of Health, we know that this is a huge problem. Underage drinking is a leading public health problem. Children who start drinking beer, for example, at the age of 15, are 4 times more likely to become dependent on alcohol later in life, or alcoholics. And there we ask the parents who give alcohol to kids, do you want to be that parent? So our focus was on primary prevention. Prevent the development of substance use before it starts. Of course we have secondary and tertiary and treatment, and that is all very necessary, but the work that I'm describing is the primary prevention part. It was difficult to move funding from treatment to primary prevention, but it is possible. Now, how were the findings used? We knew this. These were the elements, risk and protective factors. We needed to strengthen and weaken or eliminate. And it was important at this time that we realized that we cannot point at the government and say, hey, you do this. We cannot point at the municipalities or the NGOs or the parents. It was a collaborative work. People had to ask themselves, what can I do? So the municipalities in Iceland, they decided to use research as a basis. We now have long-term contracts with municipalities, with around 90% of the population, who immediately after each data collection get the snapshot of what is happening amongst their kids now, so they can act immediately. All sorts of parental work was initiated. We have a huge NGO, parental NGO, like a national parental organization, working in all the municipalities. So a lot of things were done. Active NGOs are really important, NGOs who are actually focusing on different parts of the model. And in our settings, we saw that the activities were crucial. So the leisure time, let's just ask, I'd like to ask you about that. If you imagine a whole year and you are 15-year-old, 15 or 16, from 1st of January to 31st of December, and you take away the sleeping hours, which are actually too few, but 7 hours maybe, you take away the sleep. How much time in percentage do you think that you are actively talking or discussing matters with your parents? You have to imagine it's the whole week, all the evenings, all the weekends, Christmas, summer vacation, Easter, special days, everything. How much time do you think kids are actually talking to their parents? Any suggestion? I gave you a hint. 3% of the time of the whole year. What about school? Actively listening to the teacher, learning, not going to school, not going back home from school, not having lunch at school, not between lessons. How much is that? It's around 15%. And then you have to go to the dentist or a psychologist or do something else. So more than 70% of the awake time of children aged 14, 15, 16 is leisure time. It's free time. And this time we need to fill up with something interesting to do, because if we don't, they hang around, they idle, they do nothing, they are bored, and they are more likely then to start using substances. Family, school, and leisure. Now the city of Reykjavik, they are trying to fill, like all the municipalities in Iceland, fill this time, and the city uses around 7% of the overall budget of the city for youth activities. Youth sports, culture, music, and they have a leisure card. A leisure card is, the city of Reykjavik, they provide each child with around 400 euros per year from the age of 6 until 18 every year. And it works like this. You sit down with your child and your child says, I want to practice basketball this winter. Sit down in front of the computer, you find on the website of the city the nearest basketball club, and when your child goes to the basketball club, the money goes from the city to the basketball club. And by doing it like this, the city, of course, has a very good quality control over the clubs and the activities, because not everyone can enter this. You have to fulfill criteria like you have to have educated trainers and teachers. You have to have good facilities. So it's the standard has been going up for the past 15, 20 years. And if now, for example, if a coach would go on a tour with some kids and the coach would be drinking alcohol, that club would be in severe problems. So quality controlled, organized activities. And it's for all children, not only the children of parents who have less money, but for all children. They say that in Reykjavik, we'll give you support and money, and you ensure the quality. And this money in the clubs and activities also makes sure that the clubs, they can pay trained trainers to do their job. They don't need to rely on volunteers. Volunteers are very important, but they can never be at the steering wheel. And this is the growth of the leisure card for the past 10 years or so. It's getting more and more support because it's working. We're getting better kids. And the participation, look at this column, the participation in activities, the age group, the green one is 10 to 12-year-old, 98% of the 10 to 12-year-old in Reykjavik are participating. 99% of 6 to 9, and if you go up to 6 to 18, it's 69%. This is today the highest participation level of children in activities, well, in a large area. I don't know how far I should go. And more children are involved in activities. This is what our friends at the Reykjavik city say. I mean, they knew 20 years ago what was important to do, what they needed to do, but knowing is not enough. It's how you act that is important. Doing nothing is the most expensive thing you do in a municipality. Many years ago, there were several treatment centers or facilities for young people with drug problems. I think today that there are 2. So there is, and if some young people at this age are in problems, that's being dealt with on an individual basis. The government, what could the government do? Well, not really very much. We had the laws since many, many years ago. They added a law, they raised the age of adulthood. But before all this happened, or started in '98, we had advertising ban, we had the guidelines on outside hours, we had a visibility ban. But it was very important when we started to do this, to work, to have the laws to refer to. Like our friends in one country north of here are doing now. They're actually visiting the bars, talking to the owners of the bars and saying, hey, there's a law here saying it's forbidden to serve alcohol under 18. Why are you serving 14, 15, 16-year-old children? Laws are important, but they don't by themselves change things. This is a visibility ban, tobacco and chewing gum. This is not in Iceland. If you go to a shop and you want to buy cigarettes, you have to ask, do you sell cigarettes? Because it's illegal to have them on display. We don't want to normalize tobacco, like chewing gum. Peanuts and gin, the same. Now to the last part of this presentation, why do we have so much emphasis on the community? Why don't we talk about the whole of Spain? Why are we talking about Tarragona, where Patricia is from? It's because the people in Tarragona, they can do things in Tarragona. They cannot do things in Madrid or anywhere else. So, if you have an average figure about the situation in your country, how on earth is that going to help you in your work? You have to have local findings. That's what we do in Planet Youth. We assist the local communities to map the situation, really simple, and give out the information immediately. A colleague of mine, he picked the wrong towns. It was supposed to be Catoria, but he said, I mean, prevention workers in Bilbao, they have no need for information from Pontevedra, or vice versa. You need your local information. Like Patricia once said to me, this is the first time we have seen the situation in the city. That was in 2015, yeah. We just came from Brazil, small, nice country. We said the same. People working on prevention in Sao Paulo, they have no need for information from Montes Carlos. So you have to have local, fresh information. Just like vegetables, it has to be local and fresh. Then it's attractive. Otherwise, you don't want it. And I mentioned in the beginning that this was also a tool to get people to work together. And what we see is that when, let's imagine, in 2 months you're doing a data collection today, here. In 2 months you have the situation in the municipality. And then you can say, okay, here's a table, here are chairs, and you can ask people from all different kinds of the society, politics, parents, schools, etc., to sit around the table because this is the situation amongst your children now. Maybe everything is fine, then you just continue doing what you're doing. If one of the categories is weak or needs strengthening, then you can focus on that because you have new information. The impact in our country, just go fast through this. 97, this is spending time with parents. This went down between 2016 and 18, the time parents were spending with the children. And immediately, the parental society was informed, hey, don't loosen up. Something is happening here, you have to make sure this is not going to happen again. And we're not talking about the GDP or anything. We're talking about parents' time with children. That raises alarms in our country, red and yellow. In some countries, this would only be a worrying thing if it was about money. Same here. Parents know where I am in the evenings. Exactly the same happened, but there is increased parental monitoring, increased participation in sports, less outside hours. Children are coming home much earlier than they used to. And at the same time as this has been addressed, this has been happening. But I mean, we have never been talking about drugs. We haven't talked about drugs. We have not talked about drugs for 20 years. We've talked about the risk and protective factors and how to strengthen them and weaken. And there is a side product of this. I think I have it in the slides. Just a minute. Quick fixes again. There are other factors that have happened at the same time that we were not planning at all. And I have to say that 20 years ago when this work started, it was an experiment and we did not know if it would work. But this is bullying, for example, 99, 2016. It has dropped dramatically. There are all sorts of bullying programs, and so a lot of other things have happened. There is less theft, less vandalism. There is less sexual abuse amongst older adolescents. All because of this juggling of the risk and protective factors. Yeah, theft. So, that's about that. Every year we have a conference in Iceland on these issues, 3-day conferences. Next one is in March, if anyone is by accident in Iceland. The weather is very nice in March. So, thank you. Okay.
Hemos un pequeñito turno de preguntas.
Okay.
¿Alguna cuestión?
Okay.
Por favor, cuestiones breves.
Did I leave you?
Me encanta que se hable de aplicar planes Youth en España, pero una cosa que querría aclarar que planes Youth en Islandia viene de la ONG Planet Youth con académicos y la sociedad civil, no digamos del Ministerio del Interior ni del Estado, ¿no? Y que luego también la situación en Islandia y en España no es la misma, porque Islandia libera el PIB en Europa y libera el índice de desarrollo humano en Europa y libera el coeficiente de Gini, que es el índice de identidad. En cambio en España estamos pues todo lo contrario, ¿no? Estamos por la cola. Y entonces ahí hay una cosa muy importante, que es el dinero. Y yo he estado buscando datos y no entiendo si se está dedicando el 7% del PIB o el 7% de sanidad y educación, pero sé que se está dedicando muchísimo dinero en Islandia. Y yo me pregunto, punto uno, ¿se va a dedicar esa misma cantidad de dinero aquí en España? O punto uno. Y segunda pregunta, ¿se va de verdad a abrir un diálogo sincero entre los expertos, como ha contado él, la evidencia científica, la sociedad civil, y un diálogo sincero quiere decir un diálogo honesto, que se escuche lo que dice el que está enfrente con genuino respeto, o se va a intentar imponer verdad?
Thank you very much for this. Well, I hope people will do as you are asking, start to work together, and that's the first step. Regarding the conditions, I do agree that we have a very unique society and relatively a rich country, but still, we were also there when the situation was worst. we were the same then. So it is not because we are this country, it is simply because what has been done. And to prove that, I mean, we have been working in many countries for the past years where there are really different circumstances, totally different, like in a society in Europe where you can get alcohol everywhere and drugs are flowing in the street. And this is actually in Lithuania. And they've gone down there in 3 cities in alcohol use amongst adolescents, 15 and 16-year-olds, by more than 30%, 32-3%. So, you know, it seems that the same methodology is working. It's very logical, irrelevant of rich and poor. Just one thing before the next question. If I'm going to get another one in Spanish, could I have someone that works? It's a lot of other noises, let's say. Okay.
No, es el canal, yo creo que es el canal.
No, it's just...
Porque tiene que...
Yeah.
Patrick,
It was English, but it was just noise.
Patricia, pero que tiene que enfocarlo a esa pantalla que está detrás, por eso no lo pilla. Tiene que ponerse, por eso está detrás de la pantalla y no...
I have to stand here.
Claro,
Okay.
a esa pantalla, ahora lo escucho.
Okay, I stand here, okay. I do as I'm told, normally.
Dile que ponga el receptor contra la pantalla y ya está. Joseba, a ver si ahora...
Yeah. If I hold it like this, yes.
Escucha.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobson, for your presentation. I would like to do in English. What about the measure we have developed in jumping tractors? Jumping tractors, we are drinking alcohol on the street. What kind of measure have you developed in this issue?
Thank you for asking. When this work started, we had young people drinking in the streets. And that was dealt with by the municipalities, but the downtown drinking was taken care of really fast by the municipality of Reykjavik, working also with the police, even though nobody was arrested or anything. But then the drinking went out into the neighborhoods. And then what was done was we created something called a parental prowl, or parental walk. I remember when the school of my children called me, and it was parents. We met at the school at 8 o'clock on Friday nights and Saturday nights. A few parents, 10, 12, and we walked in a group all over our closest neighborhood, just to find out if there were some children in trouble, and if they were, that we could help them to go home. But really, it happened very fast. That, I mean, you see the downward trend. In only 8 years, it was down by more than 50%. So now we still have the parental prowl, parental walk in the areas, but now we don't find the kids drunk, but this is more like having the parents get to know each other and increase the social capital in the areas. But the parental walk was really important. We have actually gathered, we call it a toolbox of ideas, and it takes about one day to go through where municipalities, they can cherry pick what they think would be suitable in their conditions, because cultures are different, of course. But the parental walk was really an important thing. But then again, the laws we have about the outside hours, they are soft laws. There is no penalty. It's just a reminder to all parents that it is a risk factor that children are hanging out late at night. And actually, hanging out any time is a risk factor. Hanging out during the day and, being bored somewhere is a risk factor. So it doesn't even have to be only at night. Does that answer partly?
Bueno, la última, estamos fuera de tiempo ya. No, it's in English. Dile que es en inglés.
English. Thank you.
How are you involved?
This,
It's the weak point for us.
this is our favorite question. Thank you for asking it. And to begin with, it was difficult, but to involve parents. But the most important thing that we had was we had evidence. We could, based on evidence, tell parents what was important and what was not important, not feelings. And we bombarded parents with this, and especially the NGOs. They came in very strong. The National Parental Association, called Home and School, they have focused for more than 20 years on building a bridge between parents and schools. We have another NGO called the Together Group, who is focusing constantly and only on reminding parents that time spent with children is the best time they can, the best use of time they can have. Yeah, I mean, it was a huge task. It was also difficult, even when we were talking about the outside hours. We even had parliamentarians saying, "I will not let anyone tell me how to raise my child." But these people are back now. I mean, when you see the results, when you see what happens, you cannot just be like an ostrich and put your head in the sand. These things are working. Campaigns I mentioned, but involving parents was a challenge and will be. We also have to tell parents and teach them that it's not the school that raises your child. We have been working in countries where that is the general belief, that school should raise the child, educate it, and you feed it and give them a place to stay overnight. It's not so. But we can talk for this about 2 days, also, how to involve parents.
Bueno, tenemos que darle un fuerte aplauso, estamos fuera de tiempo y muchísimas gracias, Jan. Bueno, deciros que hay un hashtag para las redes sociales, es hashtag Cannabis Catoira 2019, por si alguien quiere enterarse. Repito, hashtag Cannabis Catoira 2019.